Hello and welcome to LACurrents. I'm Anita Bennett. Each June, communities around the nation celebrate LGBTQ Pride Month. Here in Los Angeles, there's been a variety of activities, including a family-friendly event called South LA Pride. Joining us to talk about South LA Pride is journalist and community advocate Jasmyne Cannick. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Anita.
Yeah, so you are the 2022 chair of South LA Pride, correct?
I am. It's such an honor to have been chosen for that position.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about South LA Pride.
Well, it's exactly what the name is, right? It's queer folks who live in South LA celebrating Pride. And traditionally, particularly in Los Angeles, a lot of people of color communities, POC communities, would hold different Pride celebrations outside of June, primarily because they felt like they weren't represented or reflected in sort of the mainstream Pride celebrations that would take place in West Hollywood. And in Los Angeles, for example, Black Pride for over 30 years was always Independence Day weekend. It was, and there still is a Black Pride, right? And then you would have a lot of Latino Pride celebrations in September. And now, in 2022, there are Pride celebrations everywhere. Everywhere I look, there are Pride celebrations. But South LA Pride, to me, it represents not just our culture, our pride in just being, Angelenos from, the south part of the city, but also the fact that within our own community, we can celebrate Pride. We don't have to go to West Hollywood. We don't have to go to other parts of the county to celebrate who we are. We can do it in our own communities with our own family and friends.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you bring up West Hollywood because that celebration could get a little rowdy with the guys in the chaps and stuff. But South LA Pride is family friendly. Can you talk about that?
Right. So, look, West Hollywood Pride, yeah, a lot of Speedos, a lot of naked bodies running through the streets. Yes. South LA Pride is hype and it's fun, but it's really meant for folks not only to just celebrate their pride, but be able to have an event where you can bring your family to. There are a lot of queer families, a lot of lesbian couples, gay couples, just a lot of folks in our community who are raising kids and families. And a lot of times with these Pride celebrations, they don't necessarily feel like they should be bringing young ones to them. And so it was really important to organize an event that was just as fun as those other events, with the food and everything, the vendors and the entertainment, but also had this element that recognized, hey, yeah, we have families in our community and we want to be able to bring our kids out as well. Or not just our kids, what if we want to bring our grandmothers or our grandfathers or our parents?
And with the entertainment, there's live entertainment. Talk about some of the events that happen every year.
So this is the fourth year for South LA Pride. It had to take a 2-year hiatus, obviously, because of the pandemic, as did a lot of prides throughout the country, right? And so it's really exciting that in 2022, all of these prides are coming back, right? So what was really important with the planning committee and the folks around the table for South LA Pride was that the artists who performed came from the community, right? So a lot of times you'll go to Pride celebrations and they'll spend oodles and oodles of money on some big headliner, some, famous musician, right? And the folks at the planning table for South LA Pride were like, no, we want to lift up artists from our own community. Look, Los Angeles is not short on talent. We may be short on housing for people, but not on talent. Okay?
Well, this is the entertainment capital.
Right, not talent. So there are plenty of queer BIPOC artists here in Los Angeles that wanted to perform, and I'm so happy that we were able to get a good slate of artists together who really represent the community. South LA is not just Black people. South LA is Black folks, brown folks, and then more and more increasingly white folks because of gentrification. So it's like you have to take all of these things into consideration. And I think we were able to do that this year.
And who were some of this year's artists?
So this year we had the Angela Davis of hip hop, my good friend Medusa, who has been, she's an actor, or an actress. She can sing, she can rap. She's been around for a while. She was the headliner. And then we had the famous trans chorus of Los Angeles. We had our disco queen Kiki Kite, an R&B crooner, Clarice. We had our ballroom community. Now in the Black gay community, we've been known about the ballroom, but since various television shows like HBO Max's Legendary, and then Drew Paul Drag Race and some other shows, now sort of America knows about the ballroom community in terms of voguing and all of that.
And it's coming back again.
Right. So we have a great performance from our ballroom community in Los Angeles, which is thriving. Two of my favorite drag queens, Amber Crane and Soleil Valentino. And what would a South LA Pride celebration be without having a gospel choir? So we were so blessed to have the renewed Church of LA's praise team. Los Angeles is home to a handful of Black churches that are specifically centered around the queer experience, and so many Black folks were asked to leave their churches or were not welcomed at traditional Black churches. And so these churches do have choirs, because there's always that choir director, and we can sing. And so what better than to do it in our own church?
Yes. And there is a city element.
Yes.
This is hosted by 2 city council members. Talk about that.
Yes. I have an interesting relationship with both. One is my previous boss, council member Herb Wesson, and the other is council member Marquise Harris Dawson. Look, together, those gentlemen represent a huge portion of South LA, and they also represent where the majority of Black and definitely Black, but also brown queer folks live. Look, I don't live in West Hollywood, no shade to West Hollywood, but I live where other Black people live. And that is traditionally what you find with Black queer families, right? That they live in the Black community, that Latino queer couples live in their communities, whether it's, East LA or South LA. And so having those 2 men come together and say, look, we're gonna, put resources behind making sure that this is happening in our community, and we are going to lift up this part of our community, is amazing, because I can remember, as a Gen Xer, I can remember when you could barely get council members to show up and give a greeting at a Pride celebration, or give you a certificate, or recognize anyone who was queer. So we have come a very long ways.
And now they're hosting it.
Right.
Well, Councilman Harris Dawson sent us a greeting about South LA Pride. Let's take a look.
The South LA Pride event was something we were very proud to sponsor. We started this off about 6 years ago, and obviously in the last 2 years we had to call it off because of COVID. And so this is the first year we're back, and so I'm excited at the turnout, I'm excited at the energy, and I'm excited that we're starting to build momentum again. It's important to have a celebration to South LA particular and focused on the Black community, because after all, Pride is a celebration of an action that started with a Black trans woman being beaten by police and the resistance that came from the community upon that event. And so we want to continue to celebrate that resistance, continue to celebrate the importance of accepting everybody and accepting everybody as a family. We want to make sure people are recognized with their full selves in a way that also acknowledge their culture and their struggle. We're so proud to have been able to involve Jasmyne Cannick. She's been one of the leading activists for almost 20 years now. I remember her challenging at different points in time the mainstream LGBTQ community. I remember her making sure that the plight of people who are in prison who are LGBTQ is lifted to the forefront. I remember her making sure that people understood that I can walk in a room and I don't have to tell people I'm lesbian, but everybody knows that I'm black. And so those struggles for her are not disconnected.
Wow, some powerful words from the councilman about you.
Yes, I was not expecting that, Anita.
Well, how does it make you feel?
Besides old, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like, maybe when I leave this earth, people will remember me. Some of the work that I did or tried to do.
Wow. And we should also mention that Councilman Curran Price and Mike Bonin are involved as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, two more of my favorite people. Councilmember Curran Price represents a large part of South Los Angeles as well, and it only makes sense, right, to include Councilmember Price in a South LA Pride, and I'm so happy that he was willing to get involved and also put his district's resources behind it, right? And then look, Councilmember Bonin has always been a great friend, a great ally. He's a part of the LGBTQ community. Albeit, he represents a lot of the West Side. Again, when we talk about pride, particularly in the Latino community, the Black community, other communities of color, there's always an intersection, right? So there's that intersection of, yes, you're queer, but then you also have your cultural identity as well. And that's what these pride celebrations beautifully blend together. And I tell people this all the time, I've spent 20 years fighting racism in the white gay community and 20 years fighting homophobia in the Black community. Those of us who are Black and identify as queer have had to struggle at both ends in both communities. And it's really so great to have an organization, have a community event that's like, look, we get you, we see you, we understand all of who we are. It's even better when your city is behind it, your city is putting resources behind it, your elected officials, the people who represent you are saying, we see you as well, and we want to help you do that.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you brought up homophobia in the Black community because as an African American, I was always told that being gay is not a good thing. What's been your experience with homophobia in the community?
My experience is a lot different from other folks, I think. I have spent most of my career trying not to have myself painted in a box because I do so many different things, and I've never felt like I needed to walk into a room and announce to the world, I'm gay. I want people to respect me for my work and what I do, right? Have I experienced being discriminated against? Yes, as a Black woman, as a Black person, and, as someone who is a part of the same gender loving community as well. I think we have definitely made some progress, but we still have a lot of work to do. It's evident and clear in the conversations that are being held at the national level. I feel like we're headed towards having another fight around marriage equality in this country. And folks should understand, particularly when it comes around marriage equality, I was not against gay marriage, but I definitely challenged the folks who were fighting for it to recognize that that was your ceiling. If you're a white gay man or you're a white lesbian woman, your ceiling is gay marriage. Like, you have everything else. You have the house, the car, the job, the money. But for Black same gender loving couples, that is not their ceiling. They're still trying to have enough money to buy that house, to buy that car, to be able to put their kids through college, the playing field has never been level for our communities, right? And so, and understanding that, we need to make sure that as we move forward in these conversations, whether it be homophobia, right, within our the Black community, and let's be clear, homophobia exists outside of the Black community too, or it's racism within sort of the white, gay, mainstream LGBTQ community. We have to continue to have these conversations and understand this is 2022. I mean, the majority of the people that I know, for example, are people of color who are queer, right? It's not reflective in the leadership around the country and maybe even locally, but I think that that's starting to change. And it's events like South LA Pride, I think, that help put a face on that for us. I mean, people need to see who we are. We're more than just the choir director or the hairdresser. You know, we're politicians, we're teachers, we're in the entertainment field. We're a part of our families every single day.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about concern in the community in terms of what's happening in Washington and with the Supreme Court?
You know, honestly, I haven't heard a lot of concern in the community about what's happening in Washington. And you know why? Because people are trying to feed themselves and keep a roof over their heads right now. Make sure that they do not find themselves homeless, make sure that they're able to work. I mean, a lot of us are dealing with these everyday issues that are actually a little bit more pressing, which is not to say that what's going on in DC is not important, but we all know that local issues tend to trump all for folks because it's what's going to affect you most immediately right then and there. And that, like I said, goes back to what I was saying about marriage equality. If I'm struggling to pay the rent or I'm struggling to, you know, put food on the table for my family.
Or gas in your car.
Or gas, really though. Or gas in a car. Do you think I'm sitting around twiddling my thumbs thinking, well, what can I do to help fight for marriage equality today? No, I'm not. So, you know, it's a balance. It's even a balance that I struggle with. And I work in politics. I, you know, live for this stuff. But it's like, again, it's like, I need to pay attention over here because they might raise the LADWP bill. Like that might affect me more first before I need to be, you know, it's like there are issues that have always been dueling issues competing for our attention, right, as Americans. But what I really see from my community right now is just folks struggling to make it and to survive. Yeah. This pandemic hit folks really, really, really hard. And remember, you know, it definitely hit Black and brown communities harder.
Yeah, a lot of essential workers in the Black and brown communities.
Yes.
Now, the counterpoint is that same-sex marriage brought a lot of rights, like, you know, medical insurance and putting your partner on that and everything. So a lot of people say that that's what they fought for. Do you agree with that?
I can't disagree with what people say they fought for. If that's what they say they fought for, then they fought for that. I'm just saying that in addition to that, there are still issues that deserve our focus. Look, I remember waking up this morning thinking to myself, if Brittany Griner was a white lesbian in Russia right now, would this not be something that the HRCs, the GLAADs, all of sort of the mainstream white gay organizations will be screaming about every single day, and yet I don't hear anything. But that Black lesbian woman has been in Russia for how long, right? And so, again, you know, there are issues that are important to communities of color that don't always translate well sort of in the white mainstream gay community. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I think you would be hard pressed to find Black queer folks who would say they're against marriage equality, but they will give you a lot of reasons why it may not be the priority for them at the moment. And you know, traditionally that has been hard for white gay folks to accept and to understand because, again, their life experience is a lot different, right? Like I said, if they already have the job making 6 figures or 7 figures and they already own their home and they already have all of these things, they're thinking, yeah, well, this is the only thing that I'm missing. Like, you know, they're thinking, you know, but it's not the same for me as a Black lesbian woman. That's not the only thing. I need to buy a house. I need to make sure I can pay my rent.
And here we have other issues, the cost of living and a lot, but we're not going to get into all that. I want to turn the conversation back to you. Can you share your coming out story with us?
I don't really have a coming out story, Anita. I have just been who I have been. Again, I am not in the closet, but I have spent my life, just like I said, making sure that I'm respected for all of who I am and I'm not put into a box. If you ask me, I'll tell you. If you don't need to know, you don't need to know. Which I understand is a lot different from maybe younger generations, but I have never been, you know, rainbow waving person that has to put, like I said, I'm gay or I'm with her. And you'll find that a lot of people in my generation and older generations, we are like that. And it's okay if the younger generations feel like everywhere they go, everybody has to know their sexual identity, gender identity, or sexual orientation. I never had a real coming out story just because once I decided that, this is who I'm going to date or this is how I'm going to live my life, I've been on my own since I was 17. I came out of the foster care system. There was nobody for me to really have to please. You understand what I'm saying? Or so it was just kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to do me. This is who I am.
Mm-hmm. For a young person who might be struggling to come out, what advice would you give them?
Struggling to come out. I mean, one, there are a tremendous amount of resources, particularly in Los Angeles, focused on young people in terms of their coming out experience. But one of the things that I didn't have when I was younger that I think would be great for someone who is young, questioning coming out, is mentors. It are people who they can look to have conversations with that have been where they have been before. And I think, that goes back on my generation and older generations to reach back and have these conversations with younger people so that we can share our life experiences and the lessons that we've learned with folks. Everyone's coming out experience is always going to be different because there are always going to be different family dynamics, different emotional dynamics, right? But I think, I probably would have benefited if I had had someone, back when I was 18, 19, who was a little bit older, who could have sat young Jasmine down and said, well, let me tell you a couple things, girl, And I would be remiss if I didn't say this. It is particularly important because in our community, HIV/AIDS is still a huge issue, right? And so when we talk about mentorship, when we talk about young people coming out, not enough of us are having these conversations where we are still telling young people, we still got to use condoms. We still have to protect ourselves and our relationships. I lost my best friend to AIDS, and she was a black lesbian, and it's been 3 years. So, it's still ravishing.
Just 3 years ago.
Just 3 years ago. So it's still ravishing our community. And again, when you talk about coming out, there are a lot of pros to coming out. There are a lot of great things, but also it comes with great responsibility.
How so?
Because, look, I've probably been active in this work about 20 years, right? And the people who were before me, who were activists and who were speaking out for the queer community and the Black queer community, turned to my generation and said, here's the baton, now it's your turn, right? We have a responsibility, just like as Black people, look, my grandparents' generation did a whole lot of work for me to be in the comfortable position I'm in today. I never knew about drinking out of a different water fountain. I never knew about having to ride in the back of the bus. There are a lot of experiences that I never had that my grandparents had because of the work that they did. So that's what I mean. We have a responsibility, particularly the older generations, the boomers, the older end of Gen X, even the millennials, to make sure that we are paving the way, we are getting the things done today that are going to make life easier for these younger people. Because it happened when I drive down the street and I could see lesbian couples holding their hands going into Dorsey High School. I'm thinking to myself, that would have never happened 20 years ago, right? Yeah. So it makes me feel like, ooh, let me pat on the back, girl, because you were a part of that.
Yes. Are there some city resources that young people can tap into?
I would tell folks who are watching this, whether it's the young person or the young person's parents, reach out to your local council member's office. There are usually a ton of resources there. The City of LA's website is always resourceful and very well organized, and you could find things there as well. So that, I will say, is one of the biggest things that I've noticed in the past 20, 30 years is that we just have a lot more resources that weren't available. And I will say this, because I cannot have this conversation without mentioning the sad number of queer homeless youth in the city of LA. And so when you talk about a South LA Pride, one of the things that was very important that I brought up was that, one, it's a free event, but two, that we make sure that if we have queer youth who do come, who are unhoused, that they're able to eat. So that they can enjoy the event just like everyone else. A lot of Pride celebrations can cost you between $50 to $100 just to get in. South LA Pride is free, and of course we're taking into consideration that in our communities, we already know we have a large unhoused population, but that population includes a large number of queer youth.
And so they can attend the event and eat for free.
Yes, we're making sure of all of that. Like, we have vendors that are working with us, so we'll identify folks. But that was really important. The council members both agreed as well. As someone who transitioned out of the foster care system when there were no transitional programs or anything, I'm at least happy to see that today we have a lot more programs, particularly for queer youth who are transitioning out, but so many are still falling through the gaps, and we see them on the street. Saw one walking into the building today who talked to me. So we have to look out for our queer youth here, and that's always been important.
Well, it sounds like you guys covered all the bases
Tried.
for South LA Pride. What does South LA Pride mean to you, quickly?
It means I can celebrate all of who I am. I could be as ghetto fabulous as I want. I can be as, gay as I want in my community. But more importantly, it just means celebrating with family and community.
Oh, that was very well said. Do you invite your friends to South LA Pride every year?
I do, and a lot of them come, and I'm grateful for that. I have friends who identify as heterosexual, I have friends who identify as queer, and everything in between. And I challenge people too. I particularly challenge my West Hollywood friends. Look, you expect everybody to come out to West Hollywood to celebrate Pride. You come right on over into our community and celebrate Pride with us as well.
Well, it looked like a really fun event from the councilman's video.
Always, and I'm looking forward to this event continuing for years to come.
Wow. Well, this has been a lively conversation, Jasmyne Cannick. Is there anything else you want to add? Like, where can people go? What website for more information?
SouthLAPride.com. It does not get much easier than that.
I love it.
SouthLAPride.com.
SouthLAPride.com. Well, that is going to do it for us. Jasmyne Cannick, thank you so much for being here. You are the chair of South LA Pride 2022. Well, I should quickly ask you, what's your main responsibility as chair?
Helping work with the planning committee, making sure that we actually have an event that is reflective of the community, and making sure that we have community input.
Well, we are out of time. Thank you so much for watching this edition of LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Have a great day.